Tobirama versus Danzo doesn't really need an introduction. It's just a classic student versus master matchup that Leon, who paid for the video to be made, wanted me to go over. The win conditions here are simple. Tobirama is going to have to kill Danzo at least 11 times, and Danzo is going to have to kill Tobirama at least 1 time. Last thing before we get started, subscribe to the channel. We're about 8 subscribers away from 1 million. I'm not going to sugarcoat it or anything. When it comes to physical stats, we're not looking at anything particularly interesting when it comes to a matchup like Tobirama versus Danzo. The main and easiest point of comparison between the two of them is how they respectively compare to Hiruzen. While in his prime, Hiruzen is certainly stronger than the both of them. When it comes to Hiruzen as an old man, Tobirama has direct comparisons to that version of Hiruzen, whereas Danzo probably just isn't on that level. To elaborate a bit further, Danzo in his literal dying speech, his last thoughts, is thinking about how Hiruzen was always walking ahead of him and how no matter how far he ran, he could never catch back up to Hiruzen. And their respective death scenes sort of reflect this, where Hiruzen died protecting the village, Danzo died in a completely futile attempt to protect the village, failing to take out both Obito and Sasuke with his last move. He died as an acting Hokage who could never truly achieve the position, and his last thoughts are just how he pales in comparison to Hiruzen and all of his accomplishments. As you could tell, the comparison between Danzo and Hiruzen is a lot more symbolic, where the comparison between Tobirama and Hiruzen is a lot more physical. We see them directly compete with each other when it comes to them both being in Edo Tensei, where they both arrive at the battlefield at the exact same time after leaving the Hokage monument, and they both have similar feats of being able to react to Jubito while he's in his unstable form. There is some contention with Tobirama seemingly getting outsped by Hiruzen when trying to save Naruto from the God Tree, but considering we don't know Hiruzen's starting position, it could be the case that Hiruzen was simply closer to Naruto and that's why he was able to get there quicker than Tobirama was. Like I mentioned earlier, in his prime, Hiruzen would probably mop the floor with Tobirama, but there is another misconception I'd like to clear up. For the longest time, I've heard that there is a databook statement that says that Hiruzen is just outright stronger than Tobirama, or he was outright stronger than Tobirama when he was a child, but that's just actually not what the databook says. What the databook specifically says is that Hiruzen had talent surpassing the second Hokage from childhood, and that he mastered all 5 nature transformations. Not the fact that he was stronger than Tobirama in childhood. Those are obviously 2 very different claims. But realistically, the stats comparison isn't really what matters when it comes to a Danzo matchup in the first place. Danzo is a character that you have to be able to kill 10 times over in order to claim a victory over him. And you have to surpass Kotoamatsukami to do that as well, at least when you're fighting him under normal circumstances. When it comes to the Sasuke fight, while many people do think Danzo underperformed in that fight, he also didn't have access to literally the most broken thing in his arsenal, that being Kotoamatsukami for the majority of that fight. And when he finally got access to Kotoamatsukami, he had to think whether or not to sacrifice the eye for another Izanagi use or actually use the jutsu, because not only did he have to fight Sasuke, he was going to have to fight Obito, or who he thought was Madara, right after that. But in this one-on-one situation, there is no holds barred for Kotoamatsukami, which Tobirama has no genuine counter to. And I'll explain what I mean by a genuine counter in a minute. First, I want to go over the explanation for Kotoamatsukami that's given to us in the databook. These eyes dominate consciousness, turning anyone within their sight into puppets. A supreme genjutsu made usable through Shisui's Sharingan. The user exerts influence on the opponent, manipulating his actions without his being aware of it. Victory can be achieved without a battle, a wonderful genjutsu. Its power on the level of a forbidden art, strong enough to rewrite even the bindings of Edo Tensei. The glaze for this jutsu doesn't stop there though. After learning what had happened, Kabuto says there's only one genjutsu that can overwrite the Edo Tensei, And then Itachi goes on to call it just straight up the ultimate genjutsu in Kotoamatsukami. The common rebuttal to this would be something along the lines of the infinite Tsukuyomi actually being the ultimate genjutsu, but at least when it comes to controlling Edo Tensei, Kotoamatsukami is superior to the infinite Tsukuyomi in this regard. When the infinite Tsukuyomi was activated, none of the 4 reanimated Hokage were put under it. But as seen with Itachi, Kotoamatsukami works just fine on Edo Tensei and is even able to undo the bindings of it. There is actually nothing that Toby Rama would be able to do to counter this jutsu. Most of the time when it comes to Toby Rama and genjutsu talks versus the Uchiha, a lot of people would bring up that he spent his entire life fighting against the Uchiha, so it would only be natural that he has some sort of counters for the Sharingan and what it's able to do. The thing that's overlooked in that argument is that Tobirama is fighting the Uchiha in groups of people. He's not fighting the Uchiha one-on-one, at least not typically, and even if he is, there are other people around him at the very least. So he's able to be snapped out of genjutsu if put in one. The rule is if you're fighting an Uchiha one-on-one to run away, and if you have a teammate to guard each other's backs, that way you can break each other out of genjutsu. The anime does have Tobirama use the Bringer of Darkness genjutsu, the one that Hashirama uses in the manga, and that is a potential counter to the Sharingan, but like I said, it's anime filler when he's using it, not the manga canon where he never shows the capability for the jutsu at all. Tobirama also looks Sasuke right in the eye, and he looks long enough to notice that he doesn't have the typical Sharingan pattern and that he's using the Mangekyo Sharingan. This is all without mentioning that Danzo is using a Sharingan ability that doesn't even require that type of eye contact. We see Danzo use Kotoamatsukami while his head is literally wrapped in bandages when he uses it on Mifune at the 5 Kage summit. So when I say Tobirama has no genuine counter to this jutsu, I mean Danzo can use this jutsu at will, and there's nothing Tobirama can realistically do to stop it, because he doesn't even know Danzo is in possession of such a broken technique. If we give Tobirama a simple benefit of the doubt and say he does know Danzo has this technique, then we can make things just a little bit more interesting. Another jutsu Tobirama invented and is famous for is the Shadow Clone Jutsu, specifically the Multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu. And while people would think Tobirama can only make 2 shadow clones because of what we saw in the War Arc, not only is that his Edo nerfed self, but it's while he's still holding the barrier to contain the Ten Tails with the rest of the Kage that he's only able to summon 2 clones. If you want some type of idea of how much chakra this barrier takes from you, Hashirama, who we all know to have more chakra than Naruto, can only make 6 clones while using this barrier. He should be able to make 1,000, but he says the maximum number he can create is 6. When you look at it from that perspective, Tobirama being able to even make 2 is wildly impressive. That means he has about 1/3 the chakra level of Hashirama, meaning if you compare it to Naruto's, Tobirama should be able to make upwards of 300 clones while fighting. Considering Madara is the only one to ever be able to see through shadow clones and which person is which, if Tobirama is even able to make 10, that would be enough to throw Danzo off to where using Kotoamatsukami would almost be stupid for him. Whether or not Danzo actually takes the bait and uses Kotoamatsukami is somewhat irrelevant, but the presence of multiple Tobiramas on the battlefield does set up a new win con for Tobirama in the Flying Raijin slice. Realistically, the more Tobiramas the better when it comes to setting up this jutsu, because any one of them could throw a kunai that just has a Flying Raijin marker on it, and then boom, one of Danzo's Izanagi hearts is done for. Danzo isn't without his lack of counters to this jutsu though. We've seen Danzo use a curse mark that's able to completely disable Sasuke's movements whenever he's going up against him. With Tobirama splitting so many times and dividing his power each time, it's not likely that all 300 Tobiramas are still going to be so much superior to Danzo as the Tobirama we originally talked about. So Danzo could potentially immobilize a lot of these Tobiramas and just make Tobirama waste a bunch of chakra, which would then again open the door for another win con for him. And while Danzo isn't necessarily the smartest guy, he does have around 10 or so times to get it right this time. And with the clones being weaker, it also opens up Danzo to use his taper plus wind style combination. If you don't remember what that is, it's the combination he used in order to blow a hole in Sasuke's Susanoo. It's this giant AoE wind blast. And with Toby Rama, we do know that he has the necessary nature transformation to counter the taper with fire style, but Toby Rama never utilizes a fire style jutsu in the entire series, so I wouldn't even be able to say which fire style jutsu he would use to counter the taper. If we were to throw in Edo Tensei Tobirama, a very easy counter in this situation that might get rid of all 10 Izanagis and the taper at once is the Tandem paper bombs. The fourth data book tells us these are relentlessly violating detonation of explosion tags, reducing even the toughest armors to dust. Tags that summon more tags that then explode, a special explosion tag. The second Hokage developed this for the purpose of combining it with Impure World Reincarnation, or Edo Tensei if you're not a nerd. Upon activation, due to the devastating explosions, it is highly probable that the jutsu caster will be caught in it. If a live person performs this technique, death is inevitable, for it is a blast that sacrifices one's life. If the tags are continuously summoned, then it's possible for these tags to go off for 10 minutes and just bait out all of Danzo's Izanagis so that Tobirama doesn't even have to deal with them. This would work even if Danzo had the longer 5-minute Izanagi that Obito does. We see Konan set her explosions to go off for 10 minutes in order to counter Obito's Kamui, which goes on for 5 minutes, but since Obito is able to use Izanagi, he's able to counter the last 5 minutes of Konan's jutsu as well, meaning that Obito has a 5-minute Izanagi. Danzo, with just his 1-minute Izanagi, would only have to be blown up for 10 minutes in order for Tobirama to not even have to worry about the Izanagi as Danzo coming back anymore. To be fair, the jutsu did end what I can assume to be relatively quickly in the original anime and manga, but I think that's because Obito erased the original tags with the True Seeker orbs. We see whenever the smoke clears, there is a streak of True Seeker orb around Obito, and he clearly has one in his hand that he's been using for something. You could argue he was using it as a shield, but at the same time, even if he was using it as a shield, it's not like he couldn't use another True Seeker orb to erase the tags around it as well. I acknowledge that it's also possible that Tobirama simply losing his Edo Tensei body, since it was blown up so many times, also happened to deactivate the jutsu. If that's your interpretation, then it is not plausible for him to keep it going for 10 minutes in this situation with Danzo. This will likely only get rid of one Izanagi life, but that's only with one use. Since it would be Edo Tensei Tobirama using it, he could just simply use the jutsu again if he wanted to. If Tobirama does manage to get past all that, he still has to worry about Danzo making the fight a draw. Considering Tobirama is a close range fighter and he doesn't really pick people off from afar and doesn't have jutsu to do so, he could fall victim to Danzo's reverse force symbol sealing jutsu. Danzo used this originally in the manga, and both Obito and Sasuke were able to avoid it because he showed them his chest beforehand for some reason whenever he used the jutsu in order to protect Shisui's eye and make sure Obito couldn't get it. Data Book 4 tells us that this jutsu is the seal of the reverse force symbols. It's tattooed on the body beforehand of the jutsu user, and it activates at the moment of the user's death. Immediately after its activation, all the blood inside of the body gushes out and it expands in a sphere, drawing a seal. It seals, taking all the materials of the surrounding along with it, and because of how powerful the seal is, the target will never see the light of the sun again. So just to sort of wrap things up here, Toby Rama has no real genuine way to counter Kotoamatsukami, and he does have ways to get around Izanagi or bait out the 10 minutes for Izanagi, but even with those ways, he would still have to deal with either Danzo using Kotoamatsukami in the middle of that, or have to deal with Danzo sealing him inside of himself as some sort of latch-ditch effort suicide move. The more probable conclusion to this battle, if we're including Kotoamatsukami, is that Danzo would win, but Toby Rama is overall more powerful. He's got better jutsu, he's the better shinobi, and if you take Kotoamatsukami out of the equation, which isn't even Danzo's in the first place, Toby Rama would absolutely whoop him.